Welcome, truthers and truth-curious mainstreamers. This is Poe's Law with me, Charlatan Poe. So, first, after the last video, I had an amazing number of people tell me, or accuse me of being an anti-Semite or anti-Semitic, based on the theory I came up with from listening to that time drop. And I think you either are taking my words out of context or missing the point. I don't care whether you're Jewish or a witch or a cop or a CEO. If you're under the influence of these demon dogs and you're harvesting Earth's life energy, I am going to fight you. I'm going to put the truth of your existence out there so that people can see where you're hiding and fight back for themselves. It's an intense thing to feel dogpiled on for something you didn't mean. It's, real life in the best of circumstances is complicated and nuanced and takes a lot of patience to even attempt to get it right. And this is not the best of times and best of circumstances. And it doesn't feel like I've got permission to waste time on complications and nuances. I just need to make a decision and keep moving. Keep my head on a swivel. Watch out for dangers. I think that this plague has revealed things that were hidden before because people are having to slow down and spend a lot more time looking at their own circumstances. I'm spending a lot more time looking at my own circumstances and trying to figure out what's going on and what to believe. Now I'm in a time war. And it was rightly pointed out, this was kind of a silver lining of braving the comment section, that it's kind of ambiguous if anonymous source G. Gordon Liddy on these tapes was warning about the demon dogs or he was advising his agent to help the demon dogs. And the fact that it seems ambiguous could just be giving plausible deniability if these things are revealed like they're being revealed right now, or it could be sincere. I don't know what side G. Gordon Liddy is on. The fact that he wants to be our anonymous source, maybe that speaks to him being some kind of whistleblower from the past, revealing what's happening through time and trying to help us. It's something I hadn't really guessed at the beginning, but going back over everything I've learned so far with that in mind, there was no obvious red flag to having a different interpretation. And I'm not sure if I'm excited about that or disturbed about that. I guess let me know what you think. The other question I've been getting a lot, and I'm just gonna shift directions here because I need, after trying to navigate all these accusations, I'm feeling really depleted, and I need something to take my mind off and reassure me, and kind of process some of these feelings. I'm going to shift directions here, and I'm going to do it because there's been a lot of people asking about the title of the show, Poe's Law, and assuming it's based on my last name, but that's actually just a coincidence. I chose Poe's Law. It's from Edgar Allan Poe. It's a rule he used to have that if a gun showed up in the beginning, it would go off before intermission. And it's kind of the way I think about when words fail, violence follows. If you see violence coming, it's no, it's not exactly it. It's just something that I have heard once in a while and sticks with me as a way to try to remember to talk to people more, even though I absolutely hate that. This is okay because there's kind of a buffer between me saying things and then people getting to respond to it. I don't have to navigate it in the moment. So words, they try to use my words to do something, which is, it's funny that kind of coming back around to that now and thinking back to some of the work my shaman's been giving me to help me with time and sound and the language as a virus idea of thinking, words of power, and those moments when I'm like, is this really worth the money with this shaman thing? It was a moment where it is. This is worth it. She's operating on a level that's ahead of me, and she is figuring out what's helping me out and what will be important. So, thinking about words and thinking about my relationship to time, now that my trust in the continuity or unchangeability of a timeline has been eroded. I don't know who's working against us from the past or from the future, and I don't know if this time conspiracy is working with, against, adjacent to, or intersecting this situation I've discovered with the demon dogs harvesting earth energy. So I'm trying to find some kind of, anchor in time, or just learn how to live with the uncertainty. And there's something about ink and paper and books that I've always found comforting, and now that I'm kind of exploring what these things are in the context of our psychic warfare against the time conspiracy and the demon dogs, it's like doubly reassuring. I think I understand better why wizards had spell books. Even if the magic wasn't real back then, like it is now, it was more real back then than it is now. I think I have something in common with those wizards and their spell books in the way I like books, and it's strange sometimes feeling like I shouldn't say that too loudly or have that be what I lead with, because it sometimes makes it weird, like I'm trying to brag, and I'm not trying to brag. This is just what I like. I go in telepathy again. It's tough to be made to feel so self-conscious all the time. You open up the door to a little bit of self-awareness and let in some of the context of what's actually happening out there. And it's just super shitty. It just is super shitty. And you almost have to just find a way to shut off that self-awareness and shrink the world down a little bit to something more manageable to cope, or just live with the uncertainty and be okay with everyone not agreeing with you, and not letting yourself also become some kind of puppet warrior for the left and right hand of this demon dog cabal that's organizing Earth for its own appetites. You can just go out there and just, okay, this is just a puppet show, and I see who's really controlling things, and here's the line in the sand. That's my space that I can control, and beyond that, I don't have control over it, and because of that, this is the limit of the responsibility I'm willing to take for it. And I can still find some space to find that I can make enough space for myself to have a life worth living, at least. At least if I don't have to leave the porch. The yard's not bad either, I guess. So, talking about books, talking about my relationship to time, I found this. John Brown's Body by Stephen Vincent Benet. I know who John Brown is. He was maybe the strongest light worker in the past couple hundred years. Certainly, if you imagine his actions at Harper's Ferry, I'm pretty sure that was. He and his sons get a team together. They form their own militia. They raid a government base, and they make a stand in armed resistance as a way to spark I don't know if they thought about civil war, but spark an unstoppable fire that would solve the problem of slavery in the United States one way or the other. And it's kind of an interesting parallel to now, I guess, with the idea of armed resistance and feeling that there's something that offends your conscience to the point that I need to take up armed resistance against it, and wake the rest of the world up to the need to do something about this and stop living with it. A lot of people are at that point, I think. Though, I guess some of this is wisdom that I've accrued just in some years being sober. I think now might not be the best time to be making that kind of commitment. without even experiencing of the worst of what I know is happening out there, I feel completely deranged. So, doing something you can't take back, barring some kind of time intervention, I don't know the extent of their powers yet. Maybe just take this moment to let that commitment be a vivid fantasy for yourself while you keep working on the ideas around that. You don't, it doesn't have to be out of fear. You can even consider it motivated by a desire to make it more perfect when you act on it. If you decide you still want to act on it, maybe just prepare your arguments a little better. Thinking again about, if you see a gun in the first act, it's going to go off before intermission. That might be an intuition about human nature, but it's not got to be the case 100% of the time. You, as the author, can change that. You have control of your words, your story, your narrative. Okay, we might not, truly. This may all be an illusion or a dream where we just have the imagination that we're making these choices, and in reality, we are watching ourselves, and part of the feelings that we're being communicated as part of the simulation are the experiences of conscious choice and free will. It is possible, I guess, that those could be just illusions that we're experiencing as part of being plugged into the matrix, and this computer harvesting our body energy while it keeps our minds active, because it creates better energy efficient human battery pods or whatever the fuck. The only way I can really overcome that kind of argument with myself, because it's pretty convincing, is let's go deeper. I'm going to double down on my commitment to, if this is just an illusion, I'm going to enjoy the fuck out of it, because until I figure out a way to get out of it, it's all I've got. So if that makes me a more potent battery or energy efficient battery for whatever's harvesting my energy in the short term, while I figure out a way to solve this, and if I never do, I'm kind of a skeptic. I don't believe that there's some kind of like morality abacus on a cosmic scale that's keeping track of my resistance or submission points in regard to whatever this thing is that I'm not sure if it's there, or if I have it totally wrong start to finish, and I'm just like bacteria on the tongue of the cow that's licking the ice rime in Gungunga Gap, and Emir's feet are spawning trolls, and instead of that reality, I'm imagining myself in a matrix, imagining myself resisting a matrix. You can go, it's turtles. That turtle's stacked on top of each other all the way down. It's just fucking crazy right now. And while I don't personally have any recent memories of being put on an altar stone to have these demon dogs harvest my energy, I don't know what a human version of that would look like necessarily. It might just look at what it feels like to walk through a mall let alone walk through a mall in a time of plague. It's just fucking depressing and draining. And something, whatever took it, took a benefit from that, and I don't know what or who. I don't know who's benefiting from that, because it doesn't seem like there's a return on that investment. I don't feel like better cared for or well-loved livestock after I've had that energy taken out of me. I just feel like I'm closer and closer to being put out to pasture, maybe. Just, what the fuck is all this? What? Must have said something to someone they didn't like. Yeah. That was weird. So, back to John Brown's body, I guess. So this is starting to flip through it and read it a little bit. It's I took the dust jacket off. I hate dust jackets. It's like a epic poem, like the Iliad or the Odyssey, but about the American Civil War and of the scope of that war and the significance of that war. Stephen picks John Brown, and not just John Brown, but John Brown's body as the title and symbol to transmit this. It's a long fucking poem. How many pages is this? Like 400, 350 page poem? I'm not going to read the whole thing. But I do want to just kind of take a second to put it in context and come to terms with it, and just, well, maybe like help me process my anxiety about my place and time right now. So it was published or copyrighted 1927-28. Oh. He would have had in very recent memory the First World War. The Depression wasn't even a suggestion in anyone's mind. The Dust Bowl, no one saw coming when he wrote this. The Second World War, more than a decade away. No, I don't know. Years enough in the future that if there were geopolitical tensions, I don't think he expected another something that would come to be known as a world war. Yeah, he's writing an American story. The American experience in World War I was very different than the European experience of World War I. I don't think that's a tough stretch to imagine. We got in late. We didn't have nearly the casualties. It took place across an ocean, so we didn't have the physical destruction of our lives to overcome after. And America made a fuck ton of money. Basically war profiteering through lending to all the countries that had been just committing suicide slowly by the millions for years. To be fair, this is close enough to that. I don't know what his perspective on World War I was, and it's going to overwhelm my greater point, was just like putting him in the context of history. So what has come to be known as the Roaring Twenties. If, when this gets out, somebody's gone back to deepfake any of this. So if you disagree with what you're hearing or anything sounds strange, it might be a deepfake. One of these, whatever it is, through time that we're fighting has changed. So 1927-28, he writes this epic poem about the Civil War. He dedicates it to my mother and to the memory of my father. Dedicating it to his parents, and that's not any more noteworthy, I guess, than he got along with his parents and he feels like they taught him something, or he owed him something, or there was a succession of generations, a passing of a torch that he took up. And he has this note citing the historical materials he referenced for inspiration and detail. And then there's this last note he adds, which says, on page 56, in the inscription written by John Brown for his own monument, the dates of the deaths of his two sons are incorrectly given. They are so given in the original manuscript, now in the possession of the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania, and I have not felt at liberty to alter the original wording. He not only felt strongly enough that John Brown's words should be left as written, but wanted to point out this father's loving and mournful error of the deaths, and Stephen Vincent Benet's own, I don't know, almost reverence for the man and what he did. I am not telling you how to feel about John Brown, but to go back to that question from the Q&A on whether or not democracy is doomed, and trying to make a distinction between the government we have and our state that is not the political entity, the nation state, but like us as a people, as some kind of folk, as in folklore, as in like common shared stories that can give some depth. I think this kind of literature can do that. You can read Grimm's fairy tales, and you can read them in a mode of needing to write a paper about them, or you can read them in a mode of just human experience, and that maybe they are there to entertain on the surface, but maybe that there's some kind of deeper kind of inoculation or vaccination to the soul for the trouble of the world. You don't encounter evil as just a blank wall on which you can get no purchase. You can see its intimidating terror, and you can also see its faults and weaknesses, and you can begin to get your mind around it and oppose it. I think it's Joseph Campbell. Once everything's in my head, it tends to get all jumbled, but I do try to be conscientious about plagiarism. this, anyway, if it's not Joseph Campbell, I didn't come up with this. It's something I read. This is just me paraphrasing, so I don't have a copyright infringement. Something like the interpretation of history as politics and economics. I don't remember the word he used, but kind of questioning the validity of collapsing all of collective human experience, going back to our deep origins, the deep evolution of our species. If you collapse everything over thousands and millions of years into some kind of arc of political progress or arc of economic progress, the damn thing doesn't make any sense, because it's not talked about a lot, but there's no point. This, as manic as this seems, and as pointless as a lot of this actually is, if you stop and think about it, it seems to have a point until maybe things start to break down a little bit, and you have time where you're forced to be at home to start thinking about it. And when it all falls apart, when you're so used to it when you're so used to it, the fact that it's supposed to have a meaning, that it not having a meaning becomes very difficult. But fairy tales don't necessarily have a meaning. Words only mean what we believe them to mean. And evolution doesn't have a goal. It's just kind of like a blind, continuously cresting wave. And humanity is a lot like that. You can look back through history and you can pick out in the correct details to put together a pattern for yourself, to kind of chisel away a recognizable shape from the teeming mass of generations of people that have ever existed, to make that story of politics or story of economics, and kind of look the other way and use your imagination to project a point in the future or aim at some idea. But that is an illusion. This thing is just unfolding a second at a time, through time, and we're just so worried about, well, how can we stop? How can this stop right now? Well, what are we working toward? Let me ask you that. Let me ask you what this furious pace we're demanded to keep up is actually accomplishing, and where we're going. How will we know once we get there? And can we stop then? Can we just take it down a couple of notches? I know, because I've been at enough parties where I say shit like this, and somebody immediately comes in and starts talking about capitalism, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is if you reduce that thing that I'm talking about back to economics and politics, you're missing the point. Like, life should be, I think, maybe for living, and maybe living should feel a little better than it does. Life used to be abjectly miserable for most of our species. We were riddled with parasites, food shortages, disease, exposure. A couple winters ago, the heat cord went out under the mobile home, and our water lines kept freezing. So we had heat and electricity, but we didn't have water. And it was incredible all of a sudden to realize, holy shit, January in Michigan is lethal. I never until that moment necessarily like thinking about going into winter, think about more than like driving in the snow or it not having as much daylight or these like incredibly truly minor things that take on this epic stature in my mind. And all of a sudden our water's gone and I realize like what if the furnace broke and what if the power went out? And it took me just hours and hours and hours of like replacing plumbing lines that had burst and trying to get the line to thaw and then just finding it easier to replace the whole line because the thing was too frozen. And in sub-zero polar vortex January trying to dig out snow to get under there to get to it. But the fucking hardware store was open until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and I could just drive down there and make a couple trips if I need to get the parts that I need, and I was able to fix it. You don't have to go back that far in history to realize how fucking incredible that achievement is. That even in the kind of modest, shitty circumstances that I find myself in, almost every human being that has ever existed on planet Earth would trade me without a second thought for my circumstance. That's wild to think about. It's wild to think about, and when I say shit like that at parties, I will usually get somebody who wants to go back and start talking about privilege. I don't want my whole life to have to be politics or economics. It's too exhausting. Those things are just ways of interrogating the world. They are sets of tools for a specific purpose. If you're a hammer, all you see are nails. Those are tools that I use to try to secure the circumstances that then I can live in. And sometimes it takes a lot more work than at other times, but I can still put down those tools sometimes and remember what it is I'm trying to even build for. And so here at the beginning of John Brown's body, he starts with an invocation. Since I've been learning about spell work and this shamanic initiation and ritual, I get the need for invocation. It aligns your will and your purpose to pull something or some effect from the universe. It's my understanding of it. It sets a mood. It plants a flag to, I guess, be relevant to maybe what he's trying to do here. Again, disclaimer, we can take a break from politics and economics sometimes. This might not be your preferred style of just wallpaper music or entertainment where you need something in the background on. I don't know that it's mine either, but I do think as I read this, it's interesting to just to kind of watch what feelings it invokes. And so almost 100 years after he wrote this, which was like 60-ish years after the events he was writing about. I'm just going to let him speak for himself, but my intention here in reading this is to see how it makes you feel about America or yourself within America, and yourself within time, and to know that something is out there trying to take your energies, and that something is out there trying to change history and the future. So right now, how does this make you feel? Again, if anything seems strange, it probably somebody altering time or a censorship deepfake. Invocation. American muse, whose strong and diverse heart so many men have tried to understand, but only made it smaller with their art, because you are as various as your land. As mountainous deep, as flowered with blue rivers, thirsty with deserts, buried under snows, as native as the shape of Navajo quivers, and native too as the sea-voyaged rose. Swift runner, never captured or subdued, seven-branched elk beside the mountain stream, that 100 hunters have pursued, but never matched their bullets with the dream. When each known spot was an eternal spot, and every leaf was an immortal leaf. I think that I have seen you, not as one, but clad in diverse semblances and powers, always the same as light falls from the sun, and always different as the differing hours. Yet through each altered garment that you wore, the naked body shaking the heart's core. All day the snow fell on that eastern town, with its soft pelting little endless sigh, of infinite flakes that brought the tall sky down, till I could put my hands in the white sky, and taste cold scraps of heaven on my tongue, and walk in such a changed and luminous light, as gods inhabit when the gods are young. All day it fell, and when the gathered night was a blue shadow cast by a pale glow, I saw you then, snow image, bird of the snow. And I have seen and heard you in the dry, close-huddled furnace of the city street, when the parched moon was planted in the sky, and the limp air hung dead against the heat. I saw you rise, red as that rusty plant, dizzied with lights, half mad with senseless sound, enormous metal shaking to the chant of trip hammer striking iron ground. Enormous power, ugly to the fool, and beautiful as a well-handled tool. These, and the memory of that windy day on the bare hills beyond the last barbed wire, when all the orange poppies bloomed one way, as if a breath would blow them into a fire. I keep forever like the sea lion's tusk, the broken sailor brings away to land, but when he touches it, he smells the musk, and the whole sea lies hollow in his hand. So from 100 visions I make one, and out of darkness build my mocking sun. And should that task seem fruitless in the eyes of those a different magic sets apart, to see through the ice crystal of the wise, no nation but the nation that is art. Their words are just, but when the birch bark call is shaken with the sound that hunters make, the moose comes plunging through the forest wall, although the rifle waits beside the lake. Art has no nations, but the mortal sky lingers like gold in immortality. This flesh was seeded from no foreign grain, but Pennsylvania and Kentucky wheat, and it has soaked in California rain, and 5 years tempered in New England sleet, to strive at last against an alien proof, and by the changes of an alien moon, to build again that blue American roof over a half-forgotten battle tune, and call surely from a haunted ground armies of shadows and the shadow sound. In your longhouse there is an attic place full of dead epics and machines that rust, and there occasionally with casual face you come a while to stir the sleepy dust, neither in pride nor mercy, but in vast indifference at so many gifts unsought, the yellowed satins smelling of the past, and all the loot the lucky pirates brought. I only bring a cup of silver air, yet in your casualness receive it there. Receive the dream too haughty for the breast, receive the words that should have walked as bold as the storm walks along the mountain crest, and are like beggars whining in the cold. The maimed presumption, the unskillful skill, the patchwork colors fading from the first, and all the fire that fretted at the will with such a barren ecstasy of thirst. Receive them all, and should you choose to touch them with one slant ray of quick American light, even the dust will have no power to smutch them, even the worst will glitter in the night. If not, the dry bones littered by the way may still point giants toward their golden prey. I don't know about you, but it seems like I've been eating shit so long I forgot it tasted bad. And when I picked this up and I read that, oh my fucking god, it's like getting a real apple that you actually pick off of the tree after just eating those mushy, tasteless, red, delicious, waxy imitations that proliferate everywhere for whatever reason. Like getting a Honey Crisp the size of your fucking head that's just, you just bite into it and the explosion of sensation. Apple! That waking up, you know, maybe the Garden of Eden, a story of Eve sharing the apple. The story of awakening to find yourself in a fallen world. Maybe that waking up is just the realization of there's more to it than just me and the sleep that I've been in. And having a standard of comparison, being aware that there's something better, but I don't have that better thing all the time, and there being a difference between where I'm at and what I remember is possible, or what I hope is possible, that certainly does seem like a fallen world. just the human experience of waking up, and a poetic explanation of becoming conscious, and all of the terrible things that come with it, and all of the epic fights that you find yourself fighting out of nowhere, or the pathetic fights you find yourself fighting that you turn into something epic just to make it seem worthwhile. I don't remember the last time I heard somebody talk about America an America that actually belonged to us all in a mode that didn't require putting your name on a line you are going to be held accountable for later. You could just, there is a place that you could be, or you could just be, I'm going to be here, and then I'll figure out what to do here. You know, it's funny, we get Social Security numbers before we're baptized. We're inventoried by the government before we ever engage in a spiritual identification or identity. It's kind of fucking creepy and crazy. I've gone on and on and on, and I guess I had a lot on my mind that I needed to put out there and see what is making sense, and I'm also kind of starting to feel the more I put out there, the harder it will be to erase this message. I don't know who or what is trying to erase the message. And I'm gonna pretty soon here try to actually listen to the tape again and find out, or I don't review the time drop and what anonymous source G. Gordon Liddy is trying to communicate, and and try to figure out which side he's on. You know, is he trying to help us? Is he trying to pass on information that he has access to help steer the fight so that we can come out of the shadows and we can see the truth and we can do what needs to be done? We can take up politics and economics, but we'll have the right information, the right words when we get to the point we need to act. Is that what he's doing, or have I intercepted something that I'm sharing that shouldn't get out, that this message is meant for other ears? Because I still haven't figured out the passcode. I still haven't found a way to be sure it's not going to self-destruct. So, and I can't speak directly to him. I can't go the other way as of yet. I don't know how to do that. So it's crazy how quickly the real world will rush back in, and how much energy it sometimes takes to give yourself a little space to process the circumstances that you find yourself in. Alright, well, I guess stay tuned, and more time drops on the way.